Yeah, I can see you and I can hear you. Hey Ryan, I think we're live now. Can you hear me? Hey Ryan. Okay, let's figure this out. We're just having a few little technical issues, but it's all right. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so we're having an issue that my audio is going to you, I mean to the stream, but not to you.
Maybe I'll be able to hear you in the I'm trying to get into your
Trying to
game.
figure out some kind of technical issues here. We'll be starting the stream in a minute.
Hear me? Hi. Just working on getting things set up.
Can you try speaking? Let's just make sure. I think there's a few people out there.
But yeah, I guess is your sound supposed to be coming through the game or through through Discord?
I think Saki's out there. So if you can.
Oh man. Having trouble joining your game. When I click on it, it's simply not. It's not connecting. Let me try to restart.
Hey, can you hear me? Yeah, that's exactly. We cannot hear each other. Okay, let's just figure this out. Oh yeah, no, I have to. Yeah, hey Ghosty, we're trying to fix the... I can see you, yeah, I mean, we're having a technical issue where we cannot hear each other. I mean, I can hear Ryan, but he cannot hear me, so... Um, hey Ryan, can you hear me?
Hey,
I mean, I'm hearing you actually from the stream itself, so we're there. I'm restarting the game. I think that you were having some issue with the lobby, so I'm gonna restart the loading screen, if that's okay. There you go, I can see you. Okay, we made it. I have you kind of quite muted here. From my, yeah, I think it's good. I mean, the stream is actually getting your voice directly from the stream. So if you can hear me, I think we're good. Do you have headphones for the audio? Yeah, keep it running. I mean, we'll figure it out for the next time. We can do something else, but I think for now, if this is working. Yep. I think 1 second, I'm getting comments that you are still, like, people cannot hear you now. Let me see if this setting changes something. What about now?
Audio sources.
Yeah, try
Should be
try
okay.
now.
Yeah, should be okay. It's coming through the OBS link I sent. So the audio should be working. Looks okay. It is. I can see the bar moving on the VOD Ninja link. It might be an OBS thing.
So Ryan, I think everybody can hear you now, but I lost you, so I cannot hear you now.
Ah, on my headphones, or you on the call, or
Can you try now?
I know it's going through Discord. Yeah.
Hello, hello.
You lost me on the headphones, or?
Yeah, I think I have you now. I can hear you. This is the jankiest setup ever.
What's that?
I'm hearing you. I have you. I think it's working now. So they can hear us both. Great. And I can hear you. Hey, welcome.
Okay. Okay. Any better?
Yeah, I think it's working now. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, your audio is just really muffled in my ears.
I'm gonna try to be louder. What about now? Can you hear me better?
No, is it whoops. What? Yeah, the audio in my headphones is just really bad. I can't understand you all of a sudden. Shoot. Sorry, everybody, we had these things like perfectly fine like 10 minutes ago. Maybe an Instagram call wasn't the best idea. Let's see if
Oh, there we go. I think I fixed it.
a telephone call or Discord call can work. Hey, hello.
Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Jose.
Can
Is
you
this
hear
you?
me?
Yeah, it's just the audio is really. Oh no, it sounds the same as it did.
It's probably because my phone was it's far, so I can speak from my phone here, and you should hear me.
Okay, that's a little better. I'm sorry, it's really rough. I'll do the best I can.
How do I make this better? Let me just. Everybody can hear us. I think we don't have. We just have like ghosty on the stream right now, so we're kind of sorry for just delaying things, but I'm basically talking through my phone.
I see. I mean, that works. I think, however, I was hearing you through Discord earlier was working great. I'm not sure what the trouble is. or what happened with that.
Mm.
Uh, but that's okay. I mean, I'm happy to be here. We're here. We've got people hanging out, and I'm connected to your game, which is pretty dope.
Well, thanks for being here. I think that we've been trying to do this for a while. Is this coming across so you can hear me? Or am I far again?
Jose, are you there?
Yeah, I mean, I need to figure out the audio still. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
I can hear you perfectly. It's just that
Okay.
I would need to be with my phone on my face all the time.
Okay. Let's see if the Discord call can work again.
Yeah, let's try that.
It might be something about it might be the your Discord. You might have your streamer setting on so that when you went live, it like changed Discord so that you couldn't be interrupted. Sometimes that would happen. Which is why it was muting you in the Discord, and then I couldn't hear you. I can. Oops. Join call. Okay. I'm here.
Hey, can you hear me?
So if you go to your user settings, there's something called.
Can you hear me?
Is
One,
it
two,
game?
three.
Ah, wait. Say that again.
1, 2, 3. Testing.
Woo!
Good.
Yeah.
I think that was it. It was in streamer mode, and it was
Got it.
actually. I kind of canceled that. That was a good call.
Loud and clear. Yes. Wonderful. I should have thought of that sooner.
Well, for future cases, now we know how to do this.
Now we know. Awesome. Wonderful, wonderful.
So I can see you. You're playing as Nikki. I'm playing as Mark, I think. Can you see me?
Yeah. Joma-san. How do you pronounce your username?
Yeah, Joma-san, that's good.
Joma-san. Okay.
And what is the story between like your username, Scav? Where does that come from?
Actually, that's funny. Well, my last name is Skavnicki, right? So my whole life, everyone's always just called me Scav, and a lot of the times the word Scav is like there's a certain type of game where it means scavenger, and so those just letters by themselves usually are taken in anything ever. So I just threw some extra letters on there for effect, and that's it.
Right. I think that people can hear us, but they're hearing a little bit of echo. I'm not sure
okay.
what else to do.
That's probably you in my microphone. I can just try my best, hopefully, to contain that.
Do you have headphones for your computer?
Yeah, I do.
Maybe that could help.
But you guys are really making me flex the old setup. So thank you. I'm pulling out all the stops. Here we go. Let's see here. 1 second. Let me just get my computer switched over to.
Ghosty says me, actually. My voice is with echo, Ghosty? Is that what you're saying?
It's I mean, it might be echoing into it through my microphone. But it is
So maybe let me well, you set that up, give a bit of context. You know, we've been wanting to do this stream, and I hope that Ryan, if things don't work so well, we could actually repeat it. But Ryan has been someone that has started doing streams about architecture and discussing architecture. One of the first few people I would say that really is engaging with streaming content in games and architecture. So it's been, you know, great to consider him like for discussing the game, a game that we've been working for 5 years, obviously coming with certain interest in architecture as well. And yeah, like he's been like done some amazing reviews online for amazing games as well from an architectural perspective. So I'm looking forward to hear what Ryan has to say about Common'hood, and I think that this project being something that wants to evolve over the years, I think having his voice here is great to consider how the project can grow. So thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thanks everybody for your patience and getting started. I've been, yeah, that's right. I have a media practice I call Extra Office, which is where I do reviews of video games. I do YouTube. I've experimented with a lot of different channels, YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok and all that, mostly to search for what it means for architecture to participate in content culture, and that has led to a lot of crossovers with video games and streaming and stuff. And so I've been a big fan of Common'hood since day one, with architects participating more in media and more in, I guess, taking what we learn from architecture and bringing it into other fields in general. But I think in a big way, video games and gaming design and visualization, all sorts of storytelling are all ways in which architecture can participate. So it's really awesome to be here, especially in taking a look at this wonderful project. So I know it's come a long way.
Yeah, no, it's been certainly a journey. So maybe I could give you a quick rundown of, like, I know that you're pretty new to the game. You haven't played the story yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are playing the multiplayer mode, which is a creative sandbox. Basically, you have infinite materials in this kind of warehouse. You can come into this stockpile here to grab materials such as, you know, 4x4 columns, 4x8, CLT, and this is a library of materials that we want to grow over time. You can collect those materials with Control-click. It will take them straight into your action bar down here, which is from 1 to 9. So if you Control-click on something, you should be able to grab very quickly. You'll see the icon like moving into your inventory, and you will be able to place. You can use your mouse wheel if you have that to kind of scroll through your action bar and decide which item you really want to include, right?
Awesome.
Did you crash?
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything. Yeah, hang on, I'll be right back.
No worries.
Hang on.
I saw your kind of pop-up saying, "Hey, starting Common'hood," and so I assumed that you were
there we go.
Live.
Here we go. Did the audio echo get fixed? Oh no.
Yeah,
Wait,
the echo
hopefully
is gone.
Okay, is my headphones. All right. Well, good. Dang. Okay, hang on. Don't worry, I'll connect. As long as yours is running smooth. But we have
mine is running smooth. I wonder if it's, I mean, we were playing a second ago. I wonder if we're having some, you know, technical issues on the connection, the multiplayer settings, something like that.
It's probably just my computer being a little weird. Don't worry. And like, I haven't really had time, everybody, to like figure out my optimized play. You know, it might be like VSync or something. You know, with any computer game, there's a lot that goes into how to get a system running super smooth. So it's common to have these sort of issues, but I'm here now.
Yeah.
So we got drywall. So like how when thinking about the list of soil, interesting. Um, when thinking about this like list of inventory, I mean, how did you go about saying like beam column? I mean, those are kind of like beam column, right?
You're
But then
right. I think
panels and stuff
that
are
it's
are
a bit
these
arbitrary.
something that
Yeah.
yeah yeah where did those come from?
Yeah, no, I mean, we started thinking just on columns, like initially, like, profiles that were kind of square in profile, but then when we started doing rectangular profiles like 4x8s and others, we started calling them beams, I guess, just mostly for differentiating something that, could be more vertical versus something that could be more horizontal. But you could always use a column, like a 4x4, you know, stick, let's call it, or batten, or like we kind of really realize that sometimes the architectural conventions are kind of, I don't know, difficult to kind of they're not most easy to kind of convey what we're trying to do, so we kind of keep it relatively simple. But you're picking up already something that maybe could be like clarified a bit more on, between beams and columns. I feel like you are crashed again, right? Yeah, and your camera is frozen as well. So we are definitely having technical issues. I think we might have to come back with this. We'll see if this persists. We're having issue with the camera connection. Well, we definitely, if this doesn't work out today, hey, I think he's back. Hey, Ryan. Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, Ghosty, thanks for the heads up. I think that the voice of Ryan is muted on my end. Nothing has changed in the settings, and suddenly like we're kind of getting this issue. So is it possible that yours Discord is going through streamer mode now and the same issue that we had before, but on your end? Like your audio is not coming through.
Is that better?
Yeah, I think that's. I can hear you in the guest cam now. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Ghosty. Thanks, Ghosty, for letting us know. I think that. So the issue, what did you crash? Like, did your computer crash? What happened?
It's between like somehow between the game and running the cameras and everything. I think a few things are just choking. Which I'm also monitoring my computer and everything looks not too warm or anything like that. So it's just something's running up against something else, I guess.
I mean, if you want, we can like regather. I mean, I think that we can share an intention here of really, like, I can have you on screen. I'm showing a little bit what the game looks like. We certainly have an intention to have this conversation. Maybe we could resolve some technical issues and come back to this. What are your thoughts? So you want to?
So rather than me trying to join a game, maybe I could just watch you, and we can chat, or do you want to just reschedule, or is that what you're saying?
Yeah, why don't you, like, I have you on the screen, why don't I jump into the sandbox and I show you what I've been working on, maybe some building stuff, and we have a conversation. I think that your audio is coming across and your camera is coming across, so maybe I show you the game, and then at some other point we can try to do like a multiplayer experience where we build something together or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good idea. Right. Because, the game just keeps crashing for some reason now, even though it didn't before we did this, of course. That's how it works, everybody. So, so how should I watch?
So I sent you the link for the stream.
I can just watch the stream, yeah.
Or I can... Let me share my stream directly to you.
No, I think it's probably better. It's probably better if I just watch, because I mean I'll be on a little bit of a delay, but I can see myself. Hey.
I think you're gonna be like a minute behind, though.
Oh yeah, actually it is pretty. I flashed a peace sign. I still can't see it.
What about this? I'm streaming directly to you.
It might be tough for you to do that many streams, though.
Yeah, you're right.
It's probably still best for me to just watch. No?
So let me load one of these environments. Maybe I can load something. We have a conversation about it, and I'll leave it there for a little while. I mean, I'm not going to be doing much building for now. Let's just, have a conversation,
Okay. I see the loading. Yeah, I see a building. Oh man, there's like hanging plants and... Is that where you are?
Yeah. I think that I just, framed the shot of one construction that I've been working on in the past few streams. It's a little bit of improvisation, to be honest, just really putting some materials together. But yeah, like we can. In many ways, like what you build in the game is it's meaningful to you, right? Like I can build something that maybe has some intention, but it might be completely like not interesting for someone else. But again, the way you group something and then share it with someone else, the game really tried to kind of think of how would people kind of create community by designing different things, designing different pieces of architecture, different shelter styles, and sharing those with each other, right?
Yeah, I think that the premise is so. What I like about actually the material palette in particular is how it feels like it could be built from things that are about taking apart as much as they are putting together new, right? And I think that the the sort of shared or collaborative aspects of it are it comes across really well in the way that I'm looking at the architecture here as something that looks, in a way ad hoc, but also materially like together, right? A lot of the design decisions are driven by like what material could we have, like maybe we have a certain square feet. I'm looking at in particular like the panels on the top of the gray panels on the top, right? It looks like there's 2 4x8 sheets that are vertical, right? And so it looks like something like, hey, maybe we have just these 2 sheets, and maybe I'm making a little bit of that up in my head, right? But that's kind of something that in real life and in a game we can program to happen, which I think allows us to simulate different types of experiences of what it would be like to work collaboratively on stuff.
Yeah. So in many ways, what we started when you play experiences like Minecraft, right? You have an expectation of what can come out, and in a way, obviously, that was always a big reference for what can you build in something like Common'hood. But we wanted to have a possibility of creating geometries that initially were kind of orthogonal, but then you could also break that, orthogonal dimension, and those could actually map to like, materials that are kind of simple materials that you can find in standardized, like, I don't know, in Home Depot or in kind of like in different kind of construction environments, right? But then making a case that just by organizing those materials in a clever way, in an interesting way, right? That one in which, players all over the world could actually come up with ideas of how to put those materials together. Like there's something kind of beautiful that could emerge out of very simple materials, right? Not that the idea that a beautiful design comes from just fancy materials, but rather, simple materials in an interesting arrangement ought to kind of create some kind of, or resonate in different ways for you, right?
There's something really wonderful about how this project is also in a warehouse, like that the staging of the construction is already in this almost like a theater or a type of like I feel like there's a lot of staging going on, not just like not literal on a stage, like lit, though the lighting is good, right, and even, right, but the idea of sort of like staging materials for rolling out into somewhere else or staging a piece of production, and so there's a lot of that idea of like the backstage in the production of this space as an experimental game mode, right, you're in a sandbox, but that the sandbox is contained in a warehouse, right? It's kind of really awesome, because this is like, makes me feel like these could just open a big aircraft hangar door and just push them out, right? Yeah. Into a city or into a public, or that people can come test things here.
I mean, I really
That's
hope
really
that
nice.
you get to try also the story mode in a way, because the way we were always imagining the sandbox, this kind of warehouse, it's almost like the brain or the kind of the imagination of Nikki, our main character, right? Almost like you're playing through the game and she's kind of a builder, you're playing with the scarcity of materials, you're really kind of playing a survival game, but that is mainly about kind of building architecture within this abandoned factory. And then you have this space, which is this kind of infinite materials, a perfect warehouse where you could build any kind of architecture. And that becomes almost a reflection of her state of mind, almost like if she goes to sleep and she keeps on thinking about the architecture that she might want to build in the game, right? So that's not obviously explicit in the way we set it up, but this is the way we were imagining. But we certainly want to expand the sandbox for people to imagine constructions not only within a factory, but within neighborhoods. I mean, we actually on Monday we're going to be rolling an update. I'm going to show you a little bit the sandbox from a little bit more afar, but we're going to be rolling an update that expands the sandbox to a whole kind of outside courtyard, to really kind of start thinking the different contexts, the different kind of scenarios, or to really invite the imagination of different environments also play into the designs, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's very. It feels. I don't know. I'm getting like for some reason I'm thinking about the Truman Show and how it's like that there's like a backstage of production of like a street, because it almost feels like this sandbox is like there's these kind of smaller pieces of construction that are all together, framed in this big roof, and I think that's a fantastic way of thinking about, like, right, you have like levels of control, and when you create a world for somebody to exist in, right? But not just in a creepy way, right? But in like a way that suggests like how life can take place in this. And so I think that I really dig that there's more assets to the that are going on here that are a little more loose than the rigid kind of construction, because that's always the frustrating thing about, like, Minecraft, right? Like, there's only really one scale of pixel, or it's really difficult to do, like, there's not as much like furniture or looseness to it. But I really like the way that this that there's like weather, there's lighting, that and there's like a stack of 4x8 sheets that are they're not really perfectly stacked, they're kind of twisting. There's a lot of assets that have an attention to scale, and that have an attention to sort of living in a way that I think brightens up the atmosphere here.
What do you think about I mean, there's a big kind of issue for me, thinking about the kind of packs, like texture packs and like assets that are inbuilt in game. Like, for the longest time, I was resisting the idea of having pre-made objects within our building system, right? So you have beams that are very generic, right? You can build anything you want with them, but then eventually maybe through the combination of those, you can make a chair. But then we ended up going for kind of a hybrid system where some objects are pre-made, and we can obviously expand those assets, and there's some objects are generic, like you can actually build with them. But I always felt like many games out there, the assets that are pre-built kind of really create the narrative, really create the foundation of the kind of architecture, the kind of construction that you're going for. Like, famously, the Sims have, like, very specific kind of suburban house in mind, right? Like, they kind of really try to recreate a particular kind of world. And here we played with something, obviously, with a range of kind of machines specifically, because machines really become the productive environment that allow you to have the architecture that you're building. But yeah, I was always kind of hesitant of, like, how do we kind of add our own kind of world in the design of the objects that we include in the game.
Yeah. I want to try to show you something. Hang on. If I send you an image on Discord, could you pull it up to show the stream?
I can try.
Hang on. It's worth it, because I think that there's something about asset design. I'm sorry that this is like a local architect. Here, you bring up this thing I've been talking about with my students, which I think would be cool to talk with you about now. It's like, so if you click on that link, it'll take you to a page with this like wedding barn, right? And when it comes to like, if we're talking about it, it's leaving behind the video game conversation, we're talking about just asset design. I feel like there's something about the links between video games and architecture and asset design that somehow has these interesting links, because in asset design for games, you're obviously you're making things that get weathered, that go into the background, but then architecture also has a responsibility to like construct assets through the image of certain aspects of projects. And so like this barn has of course it's like a wedding chapel in Ohio that is like super going after the like white barn wedding aesthetic, like that's like super um
Yeah, I have it
this like
on
super
the stream, so I don't know if you
yeah
can see it.
um it's like this like super white barn. It's not showing up yet, but I'm sure it'll be there. Yeah, this like super wedding barn aesthetic. But if you look at the barn doors, quote unquote, that have to be on that building. Yeah, look at those two barn doors. They're so tall, right? So they're like scaled or stretched in order to accommodate both the image of the barn door and the like function of the barn door in this old project. But it reminded me, and made literally just the other day, our studio was talking about asset design and coming up with ways of thinking about architectural elements as assets, right? And that those elements have to hold and display a kind of image, a relationship to the image of culture or an image of a certain aesthetic or idea, but then like scale and stretch to accommodate architectural functions, and so I thought this was a kind of funny real life example of like, it's got to look like a barn, or it's got to be this
Yeah.
huge thing.
I always feel like when you see games that are very free in what you could build, like, players end up be like creating, like really distorting or kind of changing the expectations we have over the things that they can do, and that's what I find most beautiful about this kind of games in a way, is this kind of yeah, the surprise, right? And I always felt like the assets that you build in the game, if they're kind of too rooted to a particular idea of what this architecture should be, they kind of take away the magic, they take away the sense of like discovery and kind of rethinking these elements in an abstract way, right? Like kind of coming up in Minecraft with a kind of a giant kind of Coke can or anything, right? Like, because you have pixels that are atoms, right? And the moment that you start adding scale and vegetation, maybe like the only thing you can think about is kind of this DIY kind of like do-it-yourself environments for fabrication, which is within the story of the game, within the ideas of the game, but perhaps kind of kill a little bit the imagination.
And yeah, it always bothered me when like I would see Minecraft builds of like, I mean, I get that there's a certain level of Minecraft build that's just about like skill, and so it would replicate a space or a building like in real life, like that one really old, the one library that's supposed to be like, it just looks like an old library, right? Like it looks like old buildings or a Coke can or whatever, right? And so that is like when you get these clashes of like what a sandbox is, and what you can use it for. Because there's like something about just like digital skill of building how do I make a Coke can out of pixels, right? Which is interesting. But then like, how do I make space out of pixels is like a different question.
So what are the things that you kind of look for when you're like, I've seen you done reviews of other games, and like, what do you usually kind of get like gravitate towards?
As in, well, like I think when I'm looking at like how a video game tells an architectural expresses architectural ideas. It's all about like immersion and storytelling, and how the environment of the game reflects on the real world. So like how the immersion of a certain environment can affect the way you think about um, the world. When you leave and you go out and you go into the real world, quote unquote, like how does that game affect the way you think about it? And it's kind of like a film, like a piece of critical filmmaking, right? Like how does the story help you think about the way that you live, right? Like a really good film might do. But I think video games have an immersive an immersive enough quality to them that they can tell even more in depth, like kind of stories, and through the way that they can create communities, or you can get almost even further. So like that's like a big picture item, like, right? Like, does this video game present a critique of everyday life, right? And if it does, how well does it accomplish that? Or, what does this tell us? And of course, Common'hood is very like, and maybe you could talk about this, but the idea of commonhood is very rooted in ideas of the commons, and also has a narrative storyline that I'm really interested in exploring. So like, how does that narrative influence the kind of the architecture? So you mentioned this hangar being something that the main character might dream about. Could you tell me about that more?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is very not representative in many ways of the story of the game. So if you want, I can give you a little intro to, without spoiling the game at large, but like maybe I could show you the beginning of the story. Let me just go back to the main menu. You might be a little bit delay on this, but I'll play the beginning of the story for you. So the game really starts from this eviction process, and Nikki, our main character, kind of loses everything. I was always imagining a character that would be very much like anyone like us, that suddenly didn't realize that an economic crash would come, or something that would like the medical bills will pile up, and suddenly you would lose your home, right? And she ends up kind of checking out in a way, a factory where her parents used to work, and she realizes there's a community of squatters living there, right? And that's the point of departure of the story, right? The story starts there when she kind of is like, oh, what's going on here? Like, there's some people here, let me say hi. And one of the few things that carry on her kind of in the trunk of the car where she was leaving from her home was this kind of table saw where she knew how to do some kind of carpentry and build things. Cool. So she was certainly kind of the idea that she would be skilled on kind of doing certain things, and basically she kind of finds herself kind of joining this community of squatters, right? And the game really places you into this abandoned factory, which it's for me like a place full of potential. And that's kind of what for me sparks the imagination. It's like, what could you do here? And that's the invitation to the player to start thinking, well, I don't have much with me. I have like a table, so I have some kind of scrap material, and there's a few people here. Like, what can that alchemy kind of produce? Can I start thinking about maybe reading some books and kind of learning more, and maybe kind of organizing a community into something different?
Yeah.
And that's where the imagination of the game really starts becoming an exploration of the factory. On one side, it becomes the exploration of all the characters that you find through the factory and how to befriend them, how the community gets forged. How do you go from like someone that might hate you initially or might kind of push you back to someone that could be a friend, potentially someone that you could call family, right? And then the aspirations of that community, does it gravitate towards just maybe growth and economic growth and getting rich in a way, or do you care about the way you're doing things, maybe like creating a mutual aid network where you're supporting each other, where you're kind of caring about the neighborhood as well. The game gives you kind of options to or certain contracts to fulfill that kind of optional in a way to kind of share that wealth that you're creating, beyond just your own community. So there's a lot to unpack as the story progresses. I mean, you can spend 20 plus hours playing the story, unlocking characters. Some of them are very challenging to crack in terms of like understanding their motivations, and but at the same time, the architecture becomes a little bit of an expression of what your imagination, like what can you do in an environment such as this one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is so interesting. So like, I think that, I mean, right away, I feel like there's a clear connection between the game you've made and Detroit, right? I'm pretty close to you in Cleveland, or at least I've lived in the Cleveland area from when I was a kid, and then now later on in life, teaching a little bit at Kent State. I'm in Akron, but that there's like what's always fascinated me about living in the Rust Belt, let's say, is this constant like haunting of these massive empty warehouses that might be sitting around in the landscape, and it's this like, at least for myself, was always a spark of imagination. Like, how could what could be in there? Like, could you imagine? Look how much room there is, or what could we grow? And so there's got to be some kind of thought linking this scenario, right, with like Rust Belt. Was that on your mind, do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that there's two kind of parallel narratives to that. There is one idea of, yes, we have this infrastructure that it's suddenly abandoned. There's a whole history of why that happened. But for me, it's also like a kind of a larger idea of kind of a narrative of progress in a way, or kind of failed dreams of kind of our past generation in a way. Things that were attempted, but somehow in a very personal way, like Nikki's story, if you think about it, like, I don't want to spoil anything, but she's kind of the child that was the second generation after, like, this her parents used to work in this factory, right? And this factory used to have kind of a time of it was a time of prosperity, and what this factory was doing was supposed to be positive for the community in a way, but that somehow you're not sure why it kind of failed, and certainly there's kind of a question of what does this new generation, like Nikki in a way, kind of starts considering. How are we doing things different, right? And in a way, that's kind of my kind of generational question. Is like, how do you go about inheriting a world that it's in many cases like this, kind of falling apart, right?
Right.
And so there's kind of a personal motivation. There's certainly a more historical and kind of urban kind of motivation of reference of cities like Detroit. But I moved to Detroit kind of in the middle of the process of the game. Certainly Detroit was an inspiration, but I think that it's a kind of a larger commentary on kind of projects of, this kind of failed megalomania of progress and the dreams of what this kind of scale of projects were attempting to do.
That's really great. I mean, yeah, because there are, and as I explored the world more and more, there's empty warehouses everywhere, not just Detroit or in Cleveland, but that's certainly true. And I think it's really a testament to that narrative that the strength of that narrative, that the way in which the support network or the mutual aid network, like you were mentioning, is part of an obvious way of rebuilding, but not in the same way as it was built before, right? Or building new worlds, right? Like you're quite literally building new worlds here. Is there deer? Yo, that's awesome. Sorry, I just saw that. I don't know if you've been there for a minute, but but there's something about the that narrative that's already in place that I think is really wonderful, and I like that. I mean, and just to maybe talk about something, I also played Stray recently,
Mhm.
um, and this game also kind of reminds me, which speaking of Stray, I still owe Architect's Newspaper a write up on that. I don't know. We'll get to that soon. Um, gosh, but the maybe it can cross reference this because what I like is that it's kind of a both this game and Stray, even though there's like action in Stray, it's like a peaceful, um, it's like it's a peaceful world that you're exploring. Like there isn't like this, oh, there's a zombie apocalypse and people are eating people, and but it actually takes the question more seriously because that's my thing about a lot of like cyberpunk. Oh, cyberpunk maybe is too big of an example, but a lot of like sort of like zombie apocalypse movies as critique of contemporary situations is that they're always so violent that it's kind of just it's more of an aesthetic um, kind of exploration than it is a real critique. But I think I fancy takes like this a lot more where after any kind of and I don't know what imagined scenario or if it's post-apocalyptic necessarily or if it's just like maybe I could ask you to tell me a little bit more about that for the game. But just the fact that it's peaceful, like there's a deer, right? I think that already tells the player what kind of world that there's kind of these opportunities in this world that of rebuilding rather than taking the negativity of destruction as a kind of aesthetic experience. Instead, there's this aesthetic of life.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, I think that at the time, I remember when the pandemic started and people were talking about like, oh, like look at there's dolphins appearing in new bays and like there's kind of the repopulation of nature somehow, the rewildering project. So there's certainly a little bit of that thinking, well, if these places get abandoned, suddenly like there's new occupants kind of taking their opportunity to kind of, enjoy those places in different ways. But I do think that there is kind of a certain violence in a way. Like we were always discussing, who's the enemy here? What is the conflict in the game, right? Why? Like it wants to be a peaceful game, and it is a very peaceful game. You can like build at your own pace, and in many ways, it's a lot lighter than a survival game because you're not you quickly realize, hey, I can build enough food rather quickly. So it doesn't become very difficult to survive. But then the question was always like, how do we kind of convey the idea of thriving, right? Like where you're going to a form of precarity where you're kind of practically homeless, and you have the condition in which you could be kicked out and evicted out of this factory at any point, right? The police could come and they could kick you out, and you suddenly don't have a home again. So that kind of precarity, like how do you kind of create something that could be a thriving living condition, and even if it's for a fleeting moment, right, that community kind of could come together and kind of make sense of that moment in time with each other and with potentially with the kind of the connections with the other community projects that you can develop within the game, right? So it was, the survival was easy, but the kind of the thriving was quite difficult in a way. There's a lot of challenge to kind of create a network that it's that has culture, that has music, that kind of looks at each other in a way more than just kind of like the bare minimum to kind of pass the night and kind of survive the zombie, right? And I think that kind of process. I mean, I don't want to spoil it. There's events in the game that play a lot more into the cultural, into the kind of aspirational, like the development of a character, right? Like what does it mean to kind of try different paths or be offered opportunities in life that you maybe didn't have. So there was a lot of thinking about and what are the struggles there of like not being able to achieve certain things. Some of them are kind of certainly the lack of resources, the lack of capital, but some others are maybe stereotypes or kind of sometimes not having the confidence to pursue certain things, and how does a community kind of support each other to kind of and encourage certain voices to emerge, right? So the
Mm.
kind of the storytelling that would emerge out of like a sense of confidence that a community can provide, I think. So some of those were ideas when writing the narrative of how those play out, and again, characters that might not always feel like they could, almost creating bridges between different perspectives of the world
Mm.
that could be drastically opposite in many ways, and how
Mm.
those communities could actually start calling themselves family by the culture that they create within a space like this. So that's what I'm calling thriving in a way, but like that's for obviously for the player to kind of explore and discover if that's actually the case in their playthroughs.
Yeah, that's super. I'm wondering too, like that there's clearly some mirror between the game goals and the community building that you've done through Discord, just like around the game in real life, right? Um, I'm wondering how. I mean, because one of my big things about video games, like if I'm going like well, one of the and this isn't just like something I've brought up, but like that a lot of video games they also and I'm kind of just going this far for the stream's sake. But one of the things about video games is that not only do you think about the space that you're in the game, but you think about the space that you're in real life when you play the game. So a lot of people, like for example, GoldenEye 007 just came back out on a couple of platforms, right? But a lot of people don't really want to play GoldenEye as much as they want to go back to where they were, right? Or they think about the space that they were in when they played GoldenEye, and then that brings back comfort and you know your family's basement or whatever it was that you sort of grew up as a kid, that kind of thing, right? And so when we think about a game space environment, we also think about where we play from and like who we play with and who those networks are. Wow, this is beautiful. Um, and so that makes me think about, hey, this game also has, not only is it about building networks, but it's also been about building networks in real life. So tell me a little bit about how all that has gone.
Yeah, so that's why we're here, I guess, right? There is an idea that the game could actually foster, some kind of interest in architecture, an architecture community that at the center of sharing, blueprints and sharing designs. It was that it wouldn't be just a website where you could just download and upload like content, but rather how do you start thinking of a community that would have like a kind of a digital commons, right? Like where we could actually oh, sorry, Ghosty, someone's commenting that they haven't reached this place yet. It's kind of spoiler alert. Sorry, let me just quit to main menu. I thought that it's kind of not so late into the game. Let me just load the story. Yeah, my apologies. So yeah, in a way, the bet is that if the tools are kind of interesting enough and there is enough kind of creativity kind of emerging out of what we're building, that we can hang out and really, create a kind of a digital commons of architectural production, right? And I think that there's kind of a lot of hypotheses of how could that be created. I think some people would think, hey, maybe a website or kind of a form of open source architecture could work. Maybe it's just kind of sharing files in different ways. I personally thought that there would be like the gaming community would be the right place to kind of situate a project such as that one, right? Where there's already kind of a close connection to narrative, there's a close connection to the care of why, in a way. Why would you do something like this? And then and then the tools themselves would have to kind of test, comply to be able to afford the production of design and the imagination of that community, right? But and then also think that the gaming community has things like modding. It has kind of already devices and all sorts of technologies for collectively organizing and expanding kind of a project that they might care about, right? So the challenge is right now to keep on polishing and developing the game so that there is effectively care for it, and that see if it could actually become a place where we can hang out and think of architecture. And the streams for me have been a way of jumping into that platform, seeing its shortcomings, thinking, hey, how we can improve this. This is what I want to be doing. I want to be designing architecture not just by myself, but almost kind of as a conversation of what is interesting and what ought to be kind of considered when we're, as someone that also teaches and not only kind of designs games, right? But instead of just putting myself as a developer kind of in a position of hierarchy in a way, or a position of like, hey, I can change the game for you. I really wanted to explore what it would be like to be a player and be a member of that community, right? So streaming the game has been an opportunity to do that and really have a conversation with other players. Like Ghosty here has been one of the an amazing follower, just having a fantastic conversation, and I kind of really love hearing the comments that talk about. There was not so long ago there was a beautiful blog post about politics and how certain ideas of commonhood were kind of affecting different aspects of commons production. And if it sparks the imagination of certain people, I think that it's trying to innovate on how we do architecture. And I think that again, it's a hypothesis, right? Like if it doesn't work out, we're going to keep tweaking it and thinking what is missing for this to really spark a sense of digital community that doesn't need to be locally in the same place. We could just be some kid could be teaching us how to build in a way that we never thought of, and it's just because it's kind of incredible at kind of putting materials together in a game like this one, right? So that's kind of the bet of a project like this one, right?
Yeah. Do you find that there's been a lot of interest from architecture students or architecture adjacent people, or is it there's something about this that's also just appealing to gamers in general and a type of gamer?
I don't know, to be honest. I my sense is that there is certainly like within Steam, like but those things are overlapping a lot more, right? Like I think that more and more like young students of architecture are kind of very familiar to Discord, to Steam, to like they hang out in those places already, right? But then that community is way larger, and then there's people that would have never gone or interested in architectural education or anything like that, and they're just like brilliantly fascinated by what you can do within a sandbox. So I think that encounter is useful, and I hate to think that architectural thinking would remain only in galleries and kind of academic institutions. Like, why not having places where you can hang out differently and have a different kind of conversation, right? One that involves a much more public audience,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really powerful, and it's a statement too about how what tools architecture and you and I both being in architecture education, thinking about how to teach architecture students for the world that they're going to enter, right? And that there are things that are really useful about an architectural education that I think we're becoming more and more are becoming more and more important to teach, like ideas of collaboration, right? Ideas of how how you might work within multiple disciplines, satisfy multiple constraints, all those kinds of things that architecture as a discipline has kind of flirted with, but is having a hard time sometimes fully embracing, or at least in part coming up with ways to really structure that into the education of an architect that are more clear, right? I was just talking to my students the other day about how a studio itself is set up as a, and I hate to talk it to take it to architectural education versus the game itself, but like the the typical studio course is set up to kind of produce the individuals and their tastes versus having students work together on projects. And I'm like, you're going to be working together with people when you leave here. Trust me. You're not just going to like go all alone, like heroically and, design something. So like, I think that this tool, I mean, is there something about this game that could be built into the future of, do you foresee an architecture education that could take place in a game?
So I think that what we wanted to try today was that multiplayer mode, right? Where I feel like I've never seen an experience of architecture where you hang out into a virtual hangar and you have like materials and you have like, I don't know, 12 people just running around and building stuff and suddenly like showing you, what about this? And like it feels like real scale, right? It could be VR, but currently like it's a Steam game, right? That for me it's as immersive as a VR experience in many ways. But that's beside the point. I think that the idea of a collaboration where you could have a multiplayer experience where you could, again, 12 people, 8 people, who knows, 4 even, how you're designing together. That's something that we don't do often, right? Like we don't, and almost kind of living through that space and changing things live. That's an experience that I think with the pandemic, when Zoom came about and Miro came about, suddenly like everybody was like open to do things digitally and collaborating online, and I thought, oh yeah, this is where we could actually be like hanging out, like in Common'hood, like just designing things and kind of thinking about our designs and having conversations. I think that we're a little bit, we're getting closer to that. We don't quite have it yet. Like, I mean, we in Common'hood, we are kind of polishing that experience so that it gets there. But certainly the imagination that you could have within Common'hood, it's not as expansive as anywhere else. But I agree with you. I think that I really try to think about ways in which collaboration can happen. And sometimes it happens simultaneously, so you have a multiplayer for that. Sometimes happens asynchronously, right? So the idea, for instance, of sharing blueprints was always, hey, what if I share with you not only a design where you can download and stamp into in the world, but also I'll share with you a sequence, like a little tutorial of how I got there, so that maybe halfway through that process you decide, I'm going to fork it, I'm going to just change it and do it slightly different. Or I'm going to build it and then I'm going to break it into pieces and change a few little parts of it and group it again and share it with someone else. So the idea of collaboration being sometimes synchronous, being there all together, or sometimes just being distributed across the world, across people, right? And I don't know, that was the dream in a way, that there would be these different instances could happen, and there could be hybrid forms where sometimes multiplayer experiences would become blueprints and those would be used by multiple people, and also how people would create families of blueprints that are very synergistic with each other, but they may be like incompatible with a whole different family of blueprints that use other kind of standardization of measurements, who knows, right? Like things that we can see in the real world because they're kind of groups of people and kind of groups of people that have put buildings together that kind of somehow coordinate, right? And they realize, hey, if we coordinate, we can do things more efficiently or kind of more interestingly. So all those things could happen within a digital environment, right? But yeah, it's tricky to do so. Like I can tell you, it's been a journey to get where we're at.
Well, certainly when you're building the entire environment and the entire game and ecosystem, I imagine a lot more technically challenging than like using a software. I know that my studio 2 years ago now used Sansar as a tool to just build something, and we figured out like a Rhino to Sansar, and then we could all hop into everybody's project and like jump around and point at stuff. And I mean, it was amazing. so like the opportunity's there, but I think that like this question of how, if are these things being built in Minecraft like great architecture, right? Or are these um, things that people build in SketchUp Warehouse, like uh, uh, architecture that could be important or preserved or um, seen as elevated ideas versus collaborations like this. I think this produces, to me, this also produces like a really important um, kind of constraint on that question, or like an important step in asking that question of like, could things built in a sandbox be considered like really excellent architecture? I think this has the capacity to do that, especially when you have to produce like the community, you have to produce the um, the value or the reason for it. I think that could be that makes a case to me that like an empty sandbox doesn't.
Right. No, I agree with you. Ghosty was asking us why the NPC so mean. They push you around.
Yeah, I was
Like,
noticing
I don't know
that.
if you saw that. Yeah, like just as like for context for Ghosty, like the pathfinding of the NPCs is kind of like a big headache. It's just like one of the most difficult kind of systems, especially because they have to be able to walk on top of things that you build, and them do not read that you are a dynamic entity that kind of. So maybe that's something we can improve in the future, where they can just avoid you a bit more. But like, yeah, they don't see you too well at this point, right? And I think that in many ways, just sorry to kind of shift a little bit that point you were making, but there are kind of this stream is also about kind of sharing the humanity behind a project like this, right? Like it's also about kind of sharing there's some technical challenges that sometimes, hey, we're a small team, hey, how do we figure this out? But what are the problems that we really should be fixing or building? Like when you take 5 years to make a project like this, it's like what should be the next step, right? And I think that's the kind of conversation that I really appreciate that you're taking part of right now, Ryan. And I think that opening that up to people out there as well, it's very much what would allow to think that what we're kind of building, it's not just for us, but rather kind of something that makes sense for other people. I think we're reaching the end of our kind of allotted or kind of planned time. What do you think? Or should we just leave it here? Maybe we can continue the conversation. I wanted to have your take on metaverse, like how things like architectural production within a video game like this one could interface. Let's call it metaverse. Let's call it blockchain kind of exchange. I think that there's a lot to talk about in that space. You've spent a bit of time in some kind of rather interesting projects that controversial projects or takes on that space, but maybe we could leave that for some other occasion. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe. I'd like to. I think that's one of the things that, I mean, maybe that's really helped the Common'hood like be, where the value was never about like, or the impetus going into this project was never directly about like extraction in a way, as much as it is about building, right? And so like just that value up front, I think is partly the reason why I would say that's driving this into such a nice territory. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So I'm gonna just wrap it up a little bit. I think we're reaching the end of the day here in the game, and also the time that we had kind of planned for Ryan to be with us. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us. Ghosty and anybody else that's been out there, like, thanks for joining us on the stream. We're gonna try to make sure that in any future occasion we solve some of the technical issues, but It's been great, Ryan. I really appreciate your comments. I'm always following the content that you're producing, and your voice on architecture and video games. It's always been a really powerful one. So thanks again for
Oh,
being
thank
here.
you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, and absolutely sorry about the technical things, everybody.
It's
It's
okay.
it happens, but appreciate your patience and I really appreciate the invite and thank you so much for that.
Okay, I'm gonna just wrap it up. Thanks. See you guys.